I'm excited to be here to provide these opening remarks. And as you mentioned, I manage the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth India portfolio based in Delhi. And before I get started, I wanted to send my thoughts to all those based in India. I hope you and your loved ones are staying safe and healthy. And on a slightly happier note, Eid Mubarak to those who are celebrating. COVID-19 has accelerated the transition to a digital economy. Digital has enabled the world to stay connected to friends and family, operate businesses online, and access vital services during a time of lockdowns and social distance measures. According to a report by Google and Bain, nearly 40 million people online in Southeast Asia came online for the first time due to COVID. And Kantar estimated that India's monthly active internet user base would reach 639 million by the end of 2020. While this shift has presented incredible opportunities, it also threatens to exacerbate existing inequality gaps in communities around the world. Women and already marginalized groups are less likely to have access to and benefit from internet use. NGOs and governments lack the know-how to unlock technology and data's potential to solve societal challenges. And many small businesses remain stuck in the cash economy, unable to benefit from the opportunities presented by digitalization. Small and growing businesses in Asia experience cash flow shortages, employment reductions, and in severe cases, closure. And according to the State of Small Businesses report by Facebook, 61% of them actually reported a fall in sales due to the pandemic. But in my mind, digitalization offers hope. Many small businesses that remained resilient and in some cases thrived in the face of the pandemic were early adopters of digital, or were able to quickly pivot at the onset of the pandemic to adopt digital tools. Small businesses that digitalized improved their profit margins and productivity, increased customer loyalty, and were able to start offering new products and services. Take Grab, the Singapore-based ride-hailing service. COVID wiped out demand for ride-hailing services, but Grab quickly shifted, leveraging their digital platform to respond to the ballooning demand for delivery, and in particular, grocery delivery. Grab had the benefit of being an already digitized business model with scale, though, and that's not the case for many small businesses. So how do we help them? At the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth, we believe there's a clear imperative to lean into the opportunities that the pandemic presents, while reimagining our economic system to be more just and inclusive as we recover from COVID. In fact, we made a commitment to an inclusive economic growth and making the digital economy work for everyone well before the pandemic hit. COVID has really only made our rallying cry louder. We recognize the challenge ahead, but remain optimistic about the opportunity that digitalization offers small and growing businesses. We believe that supporting small and growing businesses offers the key to achieving inclusive growth and combating the uneven and unequal economic recovery we're seeing globally. Digital access alone is not enough, though. We need to ensure people have digital fluency and know-how and can use digital tools to actually access markets. Only when we connect small businesses to the networks that drive the modern economy will we unlock their full potential. And this vision will require unprecedented collaboration from every sector and industry. The Aspen Network of Development Entrepreneurs and the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth have come together to enable entrepreneurs and intermediaries to overcome the barriers to digitalization and tap into this opportunity. Our vision is to provide a pathway for the SGB sector to build greater resilience and maximize growth through the strategic use of digital technologies. Our strategy revolves around increasing the effectiveness of small and growing businesses and the organizations that support them. And our philanthropic investments in digital transformation are designed to help millions of small and growing businesses and intermediaries that serve them understand the benefits of digitalization, adopt digital tools, connect to markets, and ultimately thrive in the digital economy. Through the Digitalization Learning Lab, MasterCard and ANDE hope to offer a platform for practitioners to come together to learn from one another, share best practices, and really amplify our collective efforts to support small and growing businesses. One of our main objectives today is to learn what topics really interest you. The gaps that you've experienced in your journey to digitalize, and how we can kind of build an ecosystem that helps you start to bridge these gaps. I'm looking forward to learning more from Dalberg's research findings and discovering the burning topics that ANDE members hope to address in future sessions. And with that, I'll hand it back to Cypria. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I did just want to echo Emma's sentiments. You know, we are keeping those in India in our thoughts, and a Eid Mubarak to everyone who's celebrating. So a big thank you to the ANDE team for pulling together this event, and to everyone on the line for joining. I'm thrilled to be here with my colleague Kieran and share the learnings on behalf of Dalberg of some recent research that really dives into this question of digitalization and what it looks like and what the opportunities are for different enterprise service organizations. So towards the end of last year, the Algidius Foundation and Dalberg sought to better understand how business development service providers have adopted digital practices and tools, both because of COVID, but also pandemic notwithstanding. And so the team surveyed a range of BDS providers to draw learnings from their digitalization journeys, identify archetypes, and distill practical guidance for the sector more broadly. So if you have a look at this slide that's on the screen now, two things came out of the survey very clearly. I think the first was that while COVID accelerated the use of digital services, organizations overall aspired to higher levels of digitalization post-pandemic versus pre-pandemic. And I think that reflects what Emma said in her introductory remarks about the trend that we're seeing overall. And secondly, there's a large variation in how significant a role digitalization should play in enterprise support offerings. So looking at the bottom graphic responses ranged from 30 to 100% with regard to the desired share of services that are digital. And so there's no right or wrong here. It's not that 100 is good or 30 is bad. This variation is driven largely by the different contexts and strategies that each organization has. And depending on where an organization currently sits and its aspirations, there are different digital pathways or archetypes that might be more or less appropriate. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So in doing this research, the archetypes are distinguished by two key features. On one hand, you have the strategic weight of digitalization, or how central digitalization is to an organization's strategy. And on the other hand, you have the level of digital innovation. That is, how innovative is the organization's use of digital tools and approaches. And so looking at the framework, and you'll see the strategic weight on the y-axis and the level of digital innovation on the x-axis, those organizations that fall into the bottom left quadrant are captured under the enhance archetype. And for this archetype, digitalization is less central, and levels of digital innovation are relatively lower. And these organizations typically focus on offline services and complement those with online delivery. So digitalization and digitalized offerings are not a core part of that organization's enterprise support offerings. Organizations that fall into the top left quadrant are captured under the shift archetype. And so organizations in this archetype are typically those that have made a significant shift to online channels with an emphasis on digital delivery, but still also maintain some offline components. And lastly, you've got organizations that have completely reimagined service delivery by using different business models and approaches with digitalization at the center. And these fall under the transform archetype. Now, what a framework such as this is, while a framework such as this is a useful tool to tease out certain defining characteristics, digitalization is a journey, and organizations might see themselves reflected across different archetypes at different times, or straddling two archetypes depending on your structure and set of service offerings. So no pathway is necessarily better or worse in terms of the impact you're trying to achieve. And the report itself offers guidance for how an organization might assess which pathway is right for them based on strategy and context. Some of the types of strategic questions to consider could be, who are your target clients? What is your strategy for serving them effectively? How important is offline interaction for achieving that strategy? You know, to what extent does your target client base actually have access to digital infrastructure? How might that differ by gender? So there's a whole host of questions, and a lot of this is elaborated on in the report. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Kieran, who's actually going to bring these concepts to life with some specific examples, and then we're going to learn from the experience of some of our panelists as well. So over to you, Kieran.
Thank you so much, Afua. And likewise, thinking about everyone who's dialing in from India, such an incredibly difficult time, thoughts and prayers are with you, and Eid Mubarak to those celebrating. So Afua, laid out the three typologies very clearly. And as we think about the archetypes, as you see laid out here, part of what the Dalberg team did together with Arvidius was to really look at examples of organizations that were living these realities. And we spoke about this, Emma spoke about this in the opening remarks, and that the pandemic has, in a sense, been a silver lining to many organizations to really accelerate their digitalization efforts. And when we looked at the landscape of organizations, and these were mostly from Africa, Balloon Ventures stood out as an example of enhancing their digitalization features. And so Balloon Ventures invests in and provides technical assistance to high potential small businesses in Kenya and Uganda. And their services are primarily delivered in person and are supplemented by digital tools. And they do a range of stuff from supporting customers with financial management tools and operational checklists. And the reason, Balloon Ventures falls under enhance here is that, again, it goes back to the context. Many of their customers are generally not technologically advanced. Many of them have limited access to ICT infrastructure. So continued offline support is incredibly important to ensure that their service offerings are reaching the level of quality that they aspire. So in this sense, despite having some digital tools which led to internal inefficiencies in their business, the level of centrality of digital was quite low, but they did sort of go down the enhanced pathway to sort of adapt to the new normal that they found themselves in, and many of us found ourselves in the past 12 to 15 months. SOMO in Africa is an interesting example of the shift typology. SOMO is a business accelerator that supports social entrepreneurs in Africa to work to transform low-income communities. And they do a range of, they provide a range of resources to customers, including, teaching them how to fundraise, writing out business plans, thinking through how one might enter a new market, and providing a range of advice and mentorship that is tailored to the needs of customers. And SOMO is quite interesting in that they had a digital plan in place before COVID hit, and many of their services before COVID hit was offline. But because of the pandemic, they really accelerated their digitalization journey. And through that process, through that experience, found that many of their online offerings were received much better from customers. So for example, some of their Zoom classes that they started doing received such positive feedback, and they found that learning outcomes amongst customers were significantly better than the counterfactual of having day-long workshops. So again, their context and customers allowed for that impact to be created. And so they, according to our analysis, fall under the shift typology. And transform is, is quite interesting in that, if you saw the 2x2 matrix that Afua shared earlier, the digitalization journey of Bridge for Billions is really quite central to their ethos. So they are a social enterprise that builds, designs, and manages entrepreneurship programs worldwide. And central to their mission is scale, right? The idea to the want to reach as many organizations as possible globally. And so as a digitally native organization, they really sort of made digitalization central to their ethos, and some of these services are complemented by local community building efforts. But because a higher share of their services are digital, um, this this clearly felt under the transform typology. So to reiterate what Afua said earlier, no single pathway is right, is the right one for all organizations. There's no right answer. Rather, what we've found is that different pathways can be more effective for certain organizations, depending on what their goals are, depending on the goals of their customers and the context within which they operate. Can we move to the next slide, please? And very quickly, what I wanted to sort of cover before we move on to the panel discussion to hear from our panelists, the three key steps that often we've found organizations take as they consider what might be the best pathway. And Afua spoke about this briefly, some of the questions that one might want to consider as you design your strategy for digitalization. So really understanding your customer and your internal capabilities, your value proposition, and then thinking through what digital approach you might want to embark on. Here, often the question an organization faces is whether to buy a system or whether to build it internally. Again, no right answer. There are lots of systems online and available to organizations these days. It really depends on what capabilities and what products and services you are espousing for in your markets. And thirdly, incredibly important to sort of, as you go down the implementation journey, to apply that learning lens to make sure that results are being tracked, but the overall delivery is being iterated on based on feedback and lessons that you receive.